Okay, I see that notice. We're good? Okay, I'd like to call the special meeting of the High Point Board of Ed to order at 7:04. I guess we'll try to stand for a flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
which
one
nation
nation under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
Liberty and justice.
for all.
Open Public Meetings Act. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Augusta, Branchville, and Sussex post offices, and notices sent to the New Jersey Herald, the New Jersey Sunday Herald, and the clerk of the boroughs of Branchville and Sussex and the townships of Frankfort, Lafayette, and Wantage. I'll read our mission statement. High Point Regional High School, in partnership with staff, family, and community, is dedicated to the quest for individual excellence. By fostering high standards of achievement, we prepare students to become responsible and productive members of a diverse society. May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Arnold.
Here.
Mr. Carrazza,
Here.
Mr. Dunn,
Here.
Ms. Nugent, Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Sedona,
Here.
Mr. Klein, not yet, Dr. Ripley,
Here.
myself, Mr. Campbell.
Present.
He will be providing information on tonight's agenda. Mr. President, we do have a quorum.
Okay, excellent. Just a notice in case we have any technical difficulties going through this evening, because there are some thunderstorms working their way through the area, and if people lose connection, do your best to reconnect. But at this time, we will open for public comments for the agenda items only. And let me find over.
Could we ask that whoever is not speaking mute their microphone while they're not speaking?
Yes. Yeah, that would be wonderful. If anybody that is not speaking currently, mute their microphone so that there's no reverberation. So may I have a motion to open for public comments?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Anyone that would like to make public comments, I believe that Mr. Yardley, or I can give you permission to speak. So is there a way to, somebody raises their hand? And I'm gonna just scroll through. I don't see any hands raised. Is that correct? Might be a short public comment session. Well, seeing no public comments, we'll move forward with the special meeting agenda. And we now have other business, and I will turn this over to Dr. Ripley.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being in attendance. Can everybody hear me? Very good. You never know. So we get federal grants each year that we go over, and Mr. Campbell is going to elaborate on that. but the one about which we're going to speak this evening is called ESSER 3, about which you'll hear more. But what it is it requires us to garner community stakeholder input so as to discuss how best to allocate those funds. And so what Mr. Campbell is going to present all of that. We're going to talk about our Safe Return to School plan, which is why we have our task force meeting, because all of you were participants in creating that document and our successful school year. By the way, perhaps I should have started off with that. We finished tomorrow with our graduation with a year that wasn't perfect, but it was, I think, ultimately in the end, quite successful. We learned quite a bit. You know, we made decisions based upon the information we had at the time. Sometimes as we look back, we may have altered the decision, but we didn't have that information at the time. So again, I'm pleased that we were able to get through most of the year. Would that we could have had a more robust wrestling schedule and any other. I think that was the most reduced sport for the year. We got the play in, the musical in, and so we were here. And we are preparing to be open fully in September and get back to some semblance of normalcy, which obviously is our goal and our purpose. So we're going to talk about the challenges of that and how we get there. And so I'm going to introduce Mr. Campbell, who's going to discuss how best to proceed in that manner.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ripley. Good news tonight. We have two topics to talk about, which are both really upbeat, positive ones. First, we are eligible to receive additional federal money. So during these difficult financial times, particularly with the loss of state aid that we have incurred and will incur, to have grant money available is something that we're excited about. The second is we're talking about our return to school in September. So two exciting topics. And we're very pleased that everyone is here. I want to thank you for your time, for being here this evening. I'm going to share my screen, or try and share my screen here. How we doing? Can you see my screen? All right, terrific. So first off, again, I want to thank the Reopening Task Force. This is I think the fifth time that we've met since the spring, and your stakeholder input is appreciated. Your time is valuable, so thank you. In addition to this group, this 12-person group meets, we were meeting daily, now we're meeting twice a week, but there's a lot of people here at High Point that go into making decisions every day, and we want to thank our daily planning team for their work. Tonight, we want to talk about an overview of grant funding, specifically the ESSER 3 fund, and then our plan for reopening. It's important to point out that we are required by statute, if we apply for the ESSER 3 funds, to submit a safe return to school plan. To some degree, that plan is, I don't want to say not very meaningful. What's meaningful is your input in our planning and Mr. Talamay's leadership in us getting ready for September. The fact that we have to fill out this plan is really just saying, it's really us documenting to the federal government that we have robust collaboration and we are planning to open. Because as you'll see when we go over it, many aspects of the safe return to school plan are all dependent upon how the pandemic changes and what the safety protocols are through the summer. The history teacher in me here will enjoy this for just a moment, but some may say, why is the federal government so involved in K-12 education? It is not an enumerated power in the Constitution, but in the 20th century, first with FDR and later with LBJ, the national government grew in its involvement in all things. So the first time it really took off was in 1965, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That became No Child Left Behind, which has since become Every Student Succeeds Act. So it's going on about 60 years that the federal government has sought to really balance the playing field. The feds know that some economically disadvantaged areas or states do not invest in education as well as others, and they try and bridge that gap through grant funding. Here is a typical year of what we receive in federal grant money. This is the current fiscal year that we're in. We received $95,000 in the ESSA grant, $26,000 through Perkins for career and technology, and $210,000 for special education. We plan for these. Those are in the budget that Ms. Palasek and Dr. Ripley present in April, and they're reoccurring anticipated grants. They are also publicly announced. They are put on the agenda. We put them on the agenda multiple times. The board authorizes our application, and then the board authorizes our expenditure, and we invite public comment on these grants throughout the year. So it's a very transparent process. Specific to the pandemic, we are now about to apply for our third COVID-related grant. A year ago, we received $58,000, which went towards PPE costs, sanitizing the school, and connecting students living in remote areas. In the spring, we received another grant, $228,000, which went towards maintenance and IT, and $25,000 for learning acceleration, and $45,000 for mental health. That hasn't been spent yet. Those are still areas where we need to apply that money and hear from stakeholders how to best utilize that. The grant we're looking at now is $512,000. It's known as ESSER 3. Allowable uses. The spirit of the law is clearly to address areas of the district that were impacted by the pandemic. A minimum of 20% must be spent on addressing learning loss. And as a staff and an administration, here are our priorities right now. Pretty basic. The essence of what we do is education and student wellness. So although 20% must be spent in these areas, we would like to allocate more than that. And we look forward to feedback on how do we help students recover from what they may have lost: counseling, social and emotional learning, and academics. Just so everyone knows, the grant opened May 25th. Now, May 25th was the date of our last board meeting. So the grant opened on the 25th. We had to present it for public comment before it gets submitted. So the timeline didn't work, and that's why we're having this special meeting tonight. By June 24th, we have to submit our plan that shows that we're working towards a safe reopening. And here's an interesting point. It's $512,000. We have 40 months to spend it. So it's intended to be utilized in a way that can be sustainable over a fairly long period of time. Okay, 3.5 years to spend the money. As everyone knows, the trend is phenomenal. Our numbers are as low as they've been since July or August. And we want to get back to this. We want to have the most robust, spirited, dynamic opening as possible. Our safe return plan. What was on the agenda tonight is not the final plan. We are not asking the board this evening to adopt or accept the plan because we're still in the process of receiving feedback. So it's a draft version. What the plan has to involve, and I think this is somewhat repetitive because we already have a plan on our website that is incredibly thorough, and we are looking at these things even if we're not mandated. But you can see the type of basic considerations we have to document that we're planning for. Basic health and safety. Well, as I mentioned before, how we respond to those items there will change between now and August as the pandemic changes and as the Department of Health guidance changes. Our plan shows that we have actively begun to provide a continuity of service. to bridge the gap. A week from today, our summer program begins. A priority for next year is to have more tutoring, whether it be before school, during lunch, after school, weekends, etc. And we're looking to invest in social and emotional learning and mental health, which is an area where, again, feedback would be really helpful. We had a staff meeting earlier or last week to discuss it. We sent a form out to staff. We're offering this for public comment this evening. It's important to note that the law says that every 6 months, districts may revise the plan, and it's actually encouraged that you do so. I think they understand that to receive a large amount of money, how you think you are going to spend it today, if it's being budgeted for 3.5 years, is going to shift a little bit. So the idea is that every 6 months, we'll reevaluate this sum of money and we can revise the grant really at any time. So I'd like to turn to Mr. Talame for a minute. The feedback tonight, here's really the two things we'd love to hear your thoughts on. One is school in September. We had a handful of different schedules we used this year. We had cohorts, we had a daily form, we had PPEs, etc. So we'd love to answer your questions or hear your feedback about September. And we'd love to hear any thoughts or concerns or questions about the spending of those funds. So since Mr. Talame oversees our building and getting it ready for the opening, I'm going to turn it over to him to talk about our plans for September.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Again, I wanted to thank everybody for being here this evening, and hopefully the storms that are rolling through keep everybody connected. It's good to see so many familiar faces again, as we've met so many times throughout this school year, or really over the last 15 to 16 months. You know, and our goal, as you've seen and heard us communicate, is to get back to as much as normal as we can next year. And that's really our focus and our goal. As Mr. Campbell and Dr. Ripley said, it's really going to depend on what the state guidance is. And we're hopeful that that guidance comes sooner than later. They are saying a possibility of an end of June time frame for what that will look like for a reopening. But as you remember last year with this committee, is we met several times in the spring and then summer, and we know we got guidance in June, we got different guidance in August, and we had to kind of readjust our plans. And that's the ebb and flow of where we're at. But our goal and our focus is to return to much normalcy as possible for our students, rotating block schedule, and all the many normalcies that we can provide with that, and anything in between. The fall sports and all those things that are so important, we think the student life and the feelings of what it's like to be part of High Point is what we all yearn for on a regular basis. So fall activities, fall clubs, regular schedules is what we're looking to do. Again, whatever the guidelines are from the DOH and the Department of Education, obviously will be our guiding force with that. So looking to seek your feedback on any of that. And any questions that you may have, again, as what you see or envision as some priorities for us to look for September. I don't know how it works for Dan, if they can raise their hands virtually and also physically.
Yeah, they can raise their hands virtually, physically. They can even unmute the mic if they need to.
Okay.
So why don't we put money on the back burner for a second and just see if anyone has any thoughts, any questions, any concerns, any ideas about September, and the floor is open.
I kind of think maybe some social skills would be, important. I feel like a lot of the kids, especially as they've, the current freshmen haven't had opportunities to really mingle with a bigger crowd. So maybe some kind of social skills, grouping, training, whatever, just to help them, guide them through how to make friends again.
Yeah, good point, Leanne. It's one of the things we talked about with the staff and the social skills and the importance of that coming back together as a community is going to be really important, but also coming back to community is going to have challenges. because many have not had that type of interaction or social relationships and interactions over the course of the time. So it's a really important point.
And I think when the staff met, one of the staff members suggested, and I think Mr. Talem, said he and Ms. Leduc were working on it, is for the students that were fully virtual in particular, that to kind of have an orientation or an afternoon that might be focused specifically on those students to get back in the building. And I see Ms. Imhoff is here, and she'll be working with a lot of our students over the summer in a counseling role. But I would think, the longer you stay away from something, the more apprehension you have. So for students who have been out of the building for a year, to have them here in the summer and maybe ease their way back into being on campus would be a great idea.
I saw two hands. Mrs. Stabo, would you like to go first? Then Mrs. Branson, you're up next.
Sure, thank you. My concern would always be academics. We have children who, are freshmen, the current freshmen or the rising freshmen, tail end of 7th grade and all of 8th grade was a different learning experience for them. And for those of you who don't know, I teach math. So that is the most, sequential course topic that our students receive. And I have a very deep concern for how our math education and progress and how we're going to catch these kids up. This learning loss that's going to happen, how we're going to provide that. I had offered out other suggestions, but I don't think they're feasible. But I would like to say, I would like to see a very serious concentrated effort that on day one, we have a solid program as to how we're going to work through this.
Yep, good point, Mrs. Sable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stable. Mrs. Ranzan, did you have a comment? I saw the hand go up and then come back down. Can I unmute you myself? I think you have to unmute yourself. Oh, let me ask you to unmute. Okay, maybe she stepped away. Is there anyone else that had any comments?
Mrs. Cardinal?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, you had mentioned that you are interested in ideas for the mental health and the social and emotional learning. And I think that there is a tremendous opportunity for adults and staff members too, for understanding more of what goes into the adverse childhood events, the ACEs, and even if we want to go so far as PTSD for these kids, to be able to recognize it. Because as much as, and I've mentioned this before, but as much as there's the need for the learning, if they are still in a mode where they are reacting as opposed to thinking, because those adverse childhood events and PTSD are not a thought, it's a reaction. If they're still in that mode, learning just simply won't take place until those things are addressed. So to have some sort of opportunity to be able to recognize it, either for the kids themselves or for the staff in general.
I think,
and particularly for those HSPs, the highly sensitive people, which is 20% of the population, equally divided between boys and girls. There's a higher level of an emotional response with those kids, and that's not quite as obvious who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the areas that we need to explore and get creative with is, it's always been challenging to connect our students with mental health services. We have school-based counseling and special education psychologists, but we're in a rural area, and trying to get kids and even families connected with therapy is difficult. We need to continue to explore options and get creative. Dr. Stacy Zaremba, it's nice to call our doctor, recently earned her doctorate, was sharing on the staff meeting in our county, the waiting period in some instances for people who want access to mental health supports is prohibitive. It's just unbelievable. The demand versus the availability of those supports. But more is needed, and we have to get better acquainted with how to get not only our students, but our students and their families linked with accessible mental health services.
And I appreciate what you're saying in that. I do. I think there is also opportunity for opening up the school Monday through Friday, that those opportunities are in the classroom in the moment. And as long as there's an opportunity to identify what's going on, there's a tremendous opportunity for that connection right there that doesn't necessarily involve therapy or the hesitation for that, or mental health counselors, even unless it's a matter of sharing what somebody who's experiencing that, what does it look like? What does it sound like? How are they acting? How are they behaving? Because the behavior is generally for connection. So how do we go about that in the moment?
Good point. So we need professional development, and we need a normed system on our staff, a common language of what we see and how we some simple, perhaps non-therapeutic techniques that our faculty can employ when they see students that are struggling.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking in
Right.
the moment right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see, Miss Diaz, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Would like to speak?
Sorry, I'm at another board meeting, so I'm in the hallway. See, so SpongeBob's visiting. One of the things I definitely think that the students are going to need is time management skills, organizational skills. I can tell from my own son, it's like papers are strewn on his bed, there's no backpack, there's no folders, like it is a disaster. And I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked at and addressed, especially for those who freshman, sophomore year, and now they're looking at junior and senior and going off to college. They just have no idea how to organize themselves.
Yeah, it's a good point, Mrs. Diaz. A reacclimating of all those things. We talked about it years ago that Mrs. Frisbee used to do a ninth grade orientation, that she would go into the classes and just talk to ninth graders about just that time management, right? Organizational skills, things we need to have, but a reacclimation of that for everybody is a really good point.
It's interesting that the things that we're discussing right now really, I sort of broke them down into returning to school and the use of the funds, but everything we discussed in the past few minutes is essentially what our plan is for those funds. We just need to do some research, find out what has worked elsewhere. It even says it in the grant, and Dr. Ripley's always been an advocate of it. We want research-based, proven interventions that we're not going off on a flyer here. We need interventions that are proven effective, and that's where the bulk of our money will go. One of the things that came up in our staff meeting was the difficulty for at-risk students of getting them to come in before school or stay after school or work on the weekend. Mrs. Sabo had a lot of success working as a math interventionist, building relationships and getting students to come and work with her off hours. But there's also a sense that a lot of our students that are at risk, we have to seize the opportunity between 7:30 and 2:30 because you often don't get them to come in and connect with teachers outside of the school day. And so we're open to investing money in tutoring and supports outside of the school day. The challenge that presents, of course, is, will students come during those off hours?
Anyone else? Ms. Sabo.
Well, I'm just gonna throw this out here. Many people have heard this before. I'm just throwing it out so I could at least say I said it the last time of part of my career. What I would suggest, and again, it's the kids, we're not gonna get them to come during the day, especially during that unit lunch. And I also wanna say, like, Jess Imhoff and Kira Whelan, when they have their sessions with their students, we only have one lunch period a day, and we have 800 students that they would have to divvy up between one lunch period a day to give them appointments. My suggestion has always been to go back to a 9-period day. But if I'm going to throw it, I'm going for gold right now. I would love to have a 10-period day. Some schools have like a 0 period or a 10th period at the end. So you have a regular school 9-period day, but maybe you start something earlier in the morning or in the afternoon. And then during the lunches, if you have 4 lunches or even 3 lunches, now you have counseling available 3 periods a day for the 800 children versus 1 period of day. Perhaps we run something that we have during the lunches, because again, 3 lunches versus 1 lunch, you have math RTI or English RTI, and the children are assigned to it, and maybe truly assigned like for a marking period where it is a true lesson, not a stop in and go do your current night homework, but a true lesson. Like the teacher would teach a lesson. Here, we're teaching this lesson for 20, 25 minutes, and they could eat their lunch while they were doing it, brown bag it. And then the last part of the period could be, okay, well, what are you currently working on in your math class, and help those students. So half part of the period would be, I'm teaching a skill that I believe is important, or that their teacher, how about if the RTI teacher that period, say it's like period 5, algebra 1 RTI, period 6, you have a couple RTI periods going on. And then we coordinate with those teachers, like, all right, what topics are you going on? What algebra topics do you need in your geometry class for me to teach these kids so they could get up to snuff? But like a true daily, not just a pop-in thing, like, hey, once a week, you're gonna get a half an hour lesson, like a true class. And again, I'm going for gold because we've got this money and it's a chance to catch up on the academic learning and not put the pressure on them. The other component also is when you talk about enrichment, many of our students in the past, when we had a 9-period day, there was a huge portion, I think it had to be 70, 80 kids opted out of lunch so they could take band, chorus, choir, like a course that they wanted to take for enrichment. But now with less periods, the 8, they have to choose. So I just feel that what a great opportunity to go back. Now let me add in my, like, I'm going for the gusto. I mean, what else have I got to lose today? What if we had a 0 period or a 10th period? Something early or something after school, because not everyone's an athlete. Not everyone is an athlete. What if we had some kind of schedule where, again, enrichment, that you could take that art class that just doesn't fit into your schedule. You could have something that was totally inspiring to you, but it just doesn't fit in your normal day. I just think we could do something really wonderful and hit on all avenues of the kids who need enrichment. There were kids who failed classes. We have some children who failed like numerous classes. There's not enough summer school to catch them up. So then they could take that class that they're repeating. They could take a whole year of it, not just a quick crash course. I just think there's so many things we could do and better provide for our students if we opened up the schedule. It's just my thought. It's been my passion for quite a long time about just changing this. But again, I'd go for a 10-period day. And then you could perhaps even with the teachers, you could do, some teachers teach 0 through 8, but then other kids with childcare or whatever. Well, no, I want to do that end period at the end of the day. So I want to come in an hour later, but I'm going to stay till the end of the day. again, I just think there's many things we could do. When you talk about being creative and thinking out of the box, I think we need to think out of the box. And I think that we are boxed in with that unit lunch. I think we're boxed in. It's only 1 hour a day. And some of these kids need RTI in several courses. That's just, I was going for it. Thank you for your time.
I think you bring up some great points about having to be creative. The idea you just mentioned of a staggered staff schedule, very creative suggestion. Some staff could go, an hour earlier and another section of the staff stay an hour later. Obviously, there's contractual issues there, but they're not necessarily insurmountable. You yourself, as I mentioned, did a great job as a math interventionist. And one possibility would be to use this money for additional staff interventionists and have them, when Mrs. Sabo was a math interventionist, it was a teaching assignment, and she was very creative in the ways and times that she worked with small groups of students. We have that right now in English language arts. And this funding could be used to hire more staff to do that. Also, when you mentioned there aren't enough summer programs for a student to make those up, definitely true. And one of the things we've looked at is possibly if a student is willing to come this summer and earn full credit in a course, can we put something in place that extends, maybe it's partially unit lunch and partly after school. Can we create a plan for a student that says over this next semester, if you meet us with this action plan, lunch, after school, etc., you can take your 54 from biology this past year, and we could let you, restore credit. Didn't work for them in the summer, or they didn't have room over the summer. We could do that in the fall semester, and we could use money for that. It's exciting because we want to bring the student who has the need and the talented teacher together, and we have resources to increase the degree to which that happens. And that's a good thing. It's a good problem to have.
I see Mrs. Diaz has her hand back up, so I'll ask you to unmute. And Mr. Shore, you're on deck.
Okay, just a couple of ideas of things that we have here at Jefferson. We do have enrichment for band and chorus. So in the band kids, they have an early morning start. So they come in like an hour before school. That's been contractually worked on, and they get band in the morning if they can't fit it during the school day. And then for chorus, they do that in the afternoon. And then the teachers do have some sort of staggered schedule, and we do have the rotating drop block. So that's why I'm mentioning that that's being done here. The other thing that we have is in our library. We run it Monday through Thursday. There's no reason why it wouldn't be able, we can't be run Monday through Friday. But in the library, when the kids need extra help, there is a teacher scheduled by subject. So let's say Monday is language arts, Tuesday is social studies, Wednesday is math, etc. And then to further support that, when there's crunch times, the National Honor Society has a rotating schedule for tutoring, and they come in for community service hours, and they assist students with tutoring services to help the teachers when there's a crunch, especially like when we have quarterlies or final exams and that stuff. So just ideas, again, that could work and keep the rotating drop block. Sorry, Ms. Abel.
Ms. Diaz, that's great feedback. Actually, I really appreciate that, because that's two things that we had in place pre-COVID, and we can imagine that. And we just started to get the NHS off the ground for peer, we call it peer tutoring. And it really worked out very well. We just hope we can get back to a lot of those things. So those are really two great ideas that we like to try to embellish and make better. So thank you.
Mr. Shore.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll start off by saying, as of tomorrow, if all goes well, I will no longer have any students in the High Point High School. I'm assuming all go well. But I did have some points I want to bring up. I think all the ideas that I've heard so far are great. I think it's important to, to handle the kids who are having difficulties. Well, let's not forget about the kids who have worked their way through this, and maybe some of the enrichment programs you're talking about for the kids who did well with remote learning, and maybe they need to be challenged a little bit more. Something to think about. I unfortunately don't have any good answers for what to include there, but I just ask that you don't forget about that population, that portion of your student population. And as far as the the social skills, one of the things that I've seen in the years I've had kids in the school, one of the best way to build the social skills is through sports. Now, I know not everyone plays sports, but if you're looking for a place to put some money, I know you got some fields that could use some improvement, like the field hockey field, the turf field, and things like that. So all I can say is good luck. And that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. One of the first suggestions we received was for exercise equipment and making our weight room a little more of a community wellness center. So that's we said it during our staff meeting. What do many of us do when, as adults, we've learned when we're stressed that exercise is what successful people do it's one of the key ways to manage that. So athletics, health and phys ed, and facilities, that can be part of a wellness plan. I don't know, turf field, I know you did say turf field, but
What about even maybe like offering some yoga during those unit lunches, if available in the the different gyms or whatever. That might be something that is just a good for everybody. It could be staff and students if you would. But something else I wanted to mention was morning meeting is through a responsive classroom is a great way to build community and to address the needs of students in usually, and that would be like maybe a 0 period or homeroom period where everybody goes to homeroom and you spend that time just building community. That might be something to look into. And then also, I just wanted to mention when she was talking about the executive functioning skills of the students, I am actually going to a train the trainer event on executive functioning skills in July. The 3-day event. So that might be, I can send you that information if you think you have anybody that might be interested in that. Obviously I can't do much with it for High Point, but certainly if somebody else was interested in it, they may want to get trained in that, and to train people how to help teachers with students for the executive functioning skills.
that sounds great. And when you were talking about that 0 period of building community, I think it was the last 2 years prior to pandemic, Mr. Talamay, we were, was it the first week or 2 weeks? I think it was the first week where Mr. Talamay had challenged the staff to, as crazy as it sounds, de-emphasize content and focus on relationships. And it's very interesting. I know if you think about a student struggling in a class, let's say they're in French, and they're not motivated to work, they're not really applying themselves, they're not connecting with the teacher, there's just not a lot of success happening. It's now February and the student has just been, and you meet with the student and they say they don't like the class, they don't really feel a connection with the teacher, and you say to yourself, well, you can't do this all the time in every class. But if that's, and I'm certainly not speaking about Ms. Reynolds, because she is phenomenal. I just picked French. If the first month of school, there was trust and connection and relationship, I mean, students perform when they feel connected to the students in the other room and the teacher, and that classroom has a sense of community. We see it right now with our AP students. when you have students that are taking 5 or 6 AP courses, Heather Gonzalez had 94 students taking AP Lang, and the test was offered on a Wednesday, a day we were virtual. And I thought out of 94, if we got 80, 85, it would have been a huge success. Every single kid was there early and ready to go. And, you know, a lot of that has to do with that relationship. Mrs. Sabo, you were hailed today as Mama Sabo, and your instructional practice is founded on the fact that you're very nurturing. So, you know, back to what Mr. Talamay had us focusing on the last couple of years, it's not just fluff. And if I could just digress for a moment here, a staff member said last week, we're doing a lot of these things. What this meeting reminds me of that we need to do is we need maybe a little bit of message consistency, kind of popularize and norm some of the way we do things, and take all of the great things we do, perhaps narrow them down, and head into September with some clarity and some purpose about which specific things will be priority, so that staff and students collectively are aware of them and kind of buy into them. I hope that made sense, but sometimes we have a lot of great ideas floating around, and to try and pick a handful and really push them collectively, it needs to be done.
I see Mr. Smith with his hand up.
Good evening, everybody. So I understand, and I don't know if it still exists. Back in the day, my wife is a graduate of High Point. There was a great outdoor experiential education program, team building course, I guess, up kind of behind the football field in the woods there. And I just think, you know, ropes course isn't necessary, but there are a lot of low team building exercise things that can be done, and especially those sophomores moving up to juniors and the freshmen and those kids coming in that haven't had a lot of those things. Just a lot of team building games and exercises, you know, amongst the classes could really help them kind of get out of the funk a lot of them are in, and get used to talking to each other again and seeing each other again. And just might be a thing that isn't going to cost a lot of money, but can really make a difference in that mental health aspect, and get them outside, get them doing some of those things, and might really translate to helping in the classroom.
Thank you.
I see Mrs. Karen.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. A lot of great ideas. I believe pre-pandemic, what was very successful were a lot of the lunchtime clubs. I think that was mentioned during, some of the conversations. They had mixed chorus, they had a cappella, they had all different groups, student-run groups that got together during lunch. Is that something that we think we will be able to bring back? Because I know the students really enjoyed that.
Yes, that's our hope, Mrs. Cairns, is to be able to normalize a lot of those things again back into that pre-pandemic. Absolutely. And that was a lot of positive feedback we had about the clubs.
Yep. And then also somebody touched upon, I believe it was a teacher from a different school district, about the NHS kids actually doing tutoring or helping or having some sort of classes or meetings or something like that. I think that's an excellent idea, as well as the mental health committee that I know was started last year by a group of students. So I'm not sure if that's something, that we can start to re-implement the starting of the school year, because I think student run kids might be more apt to want to participate and feel more comfortable going and speaking with other students that are going through this, where they may not feel comfortable going to a teacher yet or going to one of the therapists or counselors in the school. You know, I think that could be something that we could look at as well.
That's great feedback. And the student mental health group that met throughout the year, Mrs. Emhoff is on the meeting as well. And
Yes.
her and myself and a couple other members met with that team of student leaders.
Yep.
And they provided tremendous feedback, and that kind of spins off of our wellness group that we had before that, which is more focused on physical and mental wellness. But we want to look at that, and absolutely our goal is to meet starting in September with that group again, and to try to broaden our range of students that are participating.
Yeah. And I think the summer enrichment programs are fantastic. I know my son wanted to take the creative writing, and I don't think that is now possible. That's not being offered. I'm not sure if it was lack of students or not, but I think those types of classes to also be offered throughout the summer are excellent. And I know, again, you know, trying to get teachers, you know, contractually, et cetera, to be able to do those classes throughout the summer, but it is definitely an excellent way to stay in touch and you know, get some extra, you know, learning that they want to do.
So I want to thank everybody for their time. I kind of envision that this will be about an hour, which is about, you know, where we're at. Just want to remind everybody of the steps that we take. In the next week, we will outline some of these ideas, and the outline is broad. We don't put into the grant what day a week for what hours, what subjects we're providing X, but we talk about perhaps a breakdown of how we're going to allocate money towards social emotional versus academic versus summer. You know, we have to try and budget for 3 summers through this, and we will submit that plan. It will be published on the school's website, and we will submit our application for the grant funds by the 24th. And it's not written in stone. It's intended to be something that's revisited and revised. And in addition to that, we're going to be working all summer following the guidance from the health department and trying to determine how normal September will be. And it's looking great. It's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And we're especially optimistic that all that rain that we got tonight is done so that we can proceed tomorrow. Mr. Spellman, any weather predictions?
Tomorrow at 5, I'll give you the forecast. Tomorrow at 5.
Nice. So thank you.
So if that concludes our other business portion of the meeting, we will open again for public comments. Although we've basically been receiving many comments from the public, we are not limited to any particular topic at this point in time. So anyone that is online, and Mr. Yardley, do we have a way of people viewing this from the outside to also submit comments?
Not with this one, but this will go up on YouTube as soon as it's over. I'll post it up on that afterwards.
Okay, so anyone that is in attendance here can make a public comment. Like I said, not limited to agenda items for the second session. If you are interested, raise your hand or wave your hand and we'll try to get to you. Okay, I don't see anyone. I have a motion to close public comment session.
Motion.
And second, Ms. Anderson? Hand is up.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so public comment session is closed. We are now going to move to an executive session. The executive session is also going to be handled virtually. A motion will be made that the High Point Regional High School Board of Education enter executive session for the purpose of discussing superintendent evaluation, which is exempt from public participation pursuant to New Jersey Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, Open Public Meetings Act. Any discussions held by the board which need not remain confidential will be made public when appropriate. Minutes of the executive session will not be disclosed until the need for confidentiality no longer exists. The board will reconvene in public session virtually at the conclusion of the executive session. It is not anticipated that any action will be taken. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, we will now enter executive session. I want to thank everyone who participated tonight in our discussion on the Safe Return to School plan, and your comments are really invaluable to helping us in that endeavor. Thank you.
Wayne, do we go out of this meeting and go
Yeah.
find a next
So-
invite?
So for a little bit of logistics, all the board members should have been forwarded a separate link for the executive session Zoom link. So we will now, I believe, all close out from here, and the board members and our
And-
Dr.
and
Ripley,